Boom, start recording. You are recording. All right. So where we left off last time was talking about strategy and the idea, shit, am I recording? Yeah, good. Okay. Where we started off last time was talking about strategy and the idea that an organization has a big strategy and various functional units, various departments of the organization exist to help the organization go forward toward that strategy. Okay. So let's talk specifically with Amazon. All right. So Amazon's initial setup, their strategic goals were to exponentially increase sales, right? Again, there was a window early on. Their sales were doubling every month, which is an insane, rate of change. So that's what they really wanted to do. They wanted to grow super fast because back to the first lecture, right? Once a business gets really big, it gets a lot of advantages. It costs X dollars to build the platform, and it doesn't matter that much if you're servicing a lot of customers or a few customers, you still got to pay that cost to set up the platform. So once you've paid off those costs, everything else is pretty much pure profit, right? I mean, yeah, there's a little bit of cost with expansion, but not much. So the point is, A, you get big and you can serve customers cheaper, and B, you deny those same scale advantages to your competitors. So in many cases, the first firm to get really big wins, because at that point, even if some other business has a better model, does a little better, you're still going to be able to offer the service a lot cheaper than they can. So that's what they wanted to do. And Amazon's approach to increasing sales, they said, hey, internet is growing, so that's great for us. That's a positive trend. That's the wind at our back pushing us forward. But they said, what can we do as a website that a catalog can't, right? What justifies having a website in 1994? Well, big thing with you guys have seen catalogs. You probably get catalogs in the mail once in a while, say, here, buy some stuff from us, right? How is a website better than a catalog? Could do my Homer Simpson smart guy, rich guy voice. What advantages does a website have over a catalog? What? You can check out right away rather than having to call it. Yeah, oh my God, isn't that a nightmare having to call and talk to somebody? Ugh, nobody wants to do that. My wife and I literally fight over who is going to make a call on those. Like, we'll order food online all the time, right? But it's like, if we got to call and talk to somebody, like, I don't want to call and talk to somebody. Well, I don't want to call and talk to somebody either. Yeah. Nobody wants to call and talk to anybody. All right, what else? That's good. What else? What else is good about websites? Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm going to say that's kind of true about a catalog too. Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, you can kind of come back to it anytime. You don't have to keep it. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Oh yeah, there's tools, right? There's tools to find stuff. Yeah, that's real good. That's a huge thing, right? What else? I saw a couple hands. Website's always on, right? They don't, back in the day, catalogs, you couldn't really call at 4 in the morning, right? If you've been drinking too much and you want to make some bad purchase decisions, it's hard to do that with a catalog. Yeah. What else? Somebody pinged me. What else? What else you got? You get tracking. Yeah. Well, in principle, you could get that with a catalog too, but right, it's automated. There's a lot of this stuff is just generally automated. The last thing I was going to say, I was hoping somebody would say it, but nobody did. But these are all good things that you said. The last thing I was going to say is customization, right? The website can be customized for you. Now, maybe that wasn't such a thing in 1994. Oh, shit, you can't see what I'm doing. Maybe that wasn't such a thing in 1994. But, by a couple years later, it definitely was, right? So all this stuff, like people who bought this also bought that. Or, they'll have recommendations based on your prior purchase history. We recommend these things, right? All that sort of stuff can be personalized for you. Catalog, they're not going to do a custom print job for every customer that gets it, right? They're going to crank out one version of the catalog and send out 1 million of them. Website, right? You can have that custom content. So these are all good things. So yeah, websites totally justified. We'll talk more about that in a moment. So the problems that Amazon had to deal with. Oh, the last thing I was going to say, a catalog can only show a relatively small quantity of items, it's like a 24, 48, 64-page catalog. You're not going to show more than a couple hundred items in there, right? Doesn't make sense for Amazon. Amazon, literally carried a multi-million book line right out of the gate, right? Because it could call the publishers and say, hey, whatever you got, we'll take 6 of them, right? You can't put that in a catalog. You can't list every book in a catalog, no way. So Amazon's initial problem, though, along with that, was simply that they had a huge product line. And if you have a huge product line, how do customers find what they're looking for, right? If they're looking for a specific title, right? If they say, yes, I want a 1985 edition of Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, yeah, you can look that up and find it and order it, and that's no problem. But what if you're like, I'd like to know more about ancient Rome, and I'm going to search for some books, right? That becomes a lot tougher. So customers typically go to the website and they're ready to buy a book, right? They're going to Amazon because they want to buy a book, because this is 1994 and that's all Amazon sells. So if they're thinking about buying a book. Maybe they have a specific title in mind. Maybe they just want some light reading for a long trip. What? They want to buy something, maybe a gift. So they're coming there with that. But the problem was, there was a lot of customers that really didn't know what they were looking for, right? They had a vague idea that, yeah, I'd like to buy something, but I don't know what I want. So they browsed for a while. The browsing is awful and tedious, because searching through millions of books, right? If the search tools aren't great, it's just awful. And then people would often give up. So the people on the inside of Amazon, they said, if we can just grab a fraction of those people, right? So maybe 1 in 10 people that was going to Amazon was actually buying something. The other 90% were like browsing around for a while and leaving. And the Amazon guys say, hey, our business is growing pretty fast, but if we could just catch a sliver of those 90% of people that are leaving without buying, we go from growing really fast to growing super duper break the internet fast, which is what we want. Okay, so that's what they were trying to do. And their solution, because they started as their business builds up, they start acquiring a lot of purchase correlation data, right? They start knowing people who bought this also bought that. So they start having that information. Once they've been in business for a year or so, they have a lot of that data. So their solution, reduce customer effort to find titles they're interested in, by adopting this recommender system, by implementing it on their site. Okay, that's the big overall thing. Now we're going to talk a little bit about process design, stuff like that. We'll come back to recommender systems. That's what all this is about. So, first of all, we can talk about the idea of a value chain. So every business takes in something as an input and somehow makes it more valuable to them. And that's why the sequence of steps of things that a business does, it's why it's called a value chain. Every step in the process should add some value, because if it's not adding value, why are you doing it, right? So you can think about it in terms of tangible goods like manufacturing. You have a manufacturer that orders components from somewhere. Those components get assembled into a product that's more valuable than the components by themselves. That finished good gets sent to a wholesaler that's closer to the retailer. The wholesaler sends it to the retailer that's closer to the customer, right? Each of those steps down the supply chain is adding value as well, because it's making it easier for the customer to get stuff. And again, any business you have has to have some sequence of steps by which they add value, right? It could be tangible stuff like manufacturing, could be intangible stuff like education. Hopefully, you come in here with some degree of knowledge, you come out with a higher degree of knowledge, plus ideally a paper degree that you can use to say, yep, I did this, I'm a reliable long-term person with some intelligence and some skills, and you should hire me, right? So we're adding value to you. Anyway, it's called a value chain because every step should add some value. Now, so Amazon's book model, 1996, what are the inputs? What is Amazon getting? How does this work? Let's talk. So I'm going to put Amazon on, we'll make it orange like their credit card. All right. So what is Amazon's business model in 1996? How How would you think it works? In case, I mean, I get a lot of you probably were not alive and sentient back then. Was anybody alive in '96? Any old people in the course? You're a little bit old. I saw a hand like. All right, yeah. So this is. I'm literally talking about stuff from before you were born. All right. Anybody want to guess? So we got customers. What is Amazon selling to these customers? Books. How do they get the books? Does Amazon make the books? No, of course not, right? 1994, Amazon is just a couple dudes in a garage. Very big garage that eventually turns into a warehouse, but still, right? So where are they getting the books? How do they get these books? Do they walk over to books? Walden Books was a book chain that died some years probably before you were born too. That's life. They're walking over to the bookstore to buy. Yeah, they call up the publisher, right? So what comes in, customers go to the website, place orders, right? And then Amazon calls up the publishers. Forwards the order, right? I'll say, what the hell was that? Groups and forward order. Okay, so it gets orders from a bunch of customers, right? It's not going to necessarily call the publisher for every single order that comes in, but you know, at the end of the day, they need so many books from a publisher, and they say, yeah, here's a list of all the stuff, right? And then what happens? Once the publisher gets the order, what do? Well, most of the publisher already has the books printed. Okay, I mean, they're probably not doing just-in-time manufacturing for books. Publisher is going to send Amazon the books, right? Yeah, we can figure that one out. Ships books in a truck to Amazon. Okay, and then what does Amazon do? What does it do first? Amazon gets this big truckload of books. Yeah, you know, it sorts them out, says, oh, you get this, you get this, and you get this, right? Amazon, you know, decomposes the shipment and sends books to customers. Yeah. Decomposes shipments, packs, and sends books out. Okay, and so books going to customers. So that's really what Amazon is doing. Amazon is acting as a middleman between the customers and the publisher. It's getting a better deal from the publishers because it can order in bulk, right? You know, it gets some kind of bulk discount if it's ordering thousands of books a day from a publisher, getting some kind of discount. Plus, you know, Amazon is getting on the phone with the publisher so the customer doesn't have to. Amazon is handling the shipping so the publisher doesn't really have to. The publishers, you know, their business is printing books and putting books on trucks to go out to bookstores, right? So Amazon is basically acting like a really, really, really big bookstore. Publisher doesn't want to deal with, you know, packaging millions of bundles of separate books to separate customers every week, right? That's Amazon's thing. So this is the value that Amazon's providing. Okay, this is why people liked it. All right. So the inputs were basically the customer orders, right? Customer says, hey, I want this. The outputs that Amazon does is basically a shipment of books for that customer, right? So it handles the, it gives the books, it doesn't produce them, but it sends them out and it does the packaging for it, and tracking and all that other stuff. All right, so that's Amazon's value chain. Now, this is, we'll have a little blow into the past. So Amazon in 1995, why, okay. This is what Amazon looked in 1995, what it looked like. I don't know why this is taking so, there we go. This is the website, and I remember this website because this is what it looked like. The first said, welcome to Amazon, 1 million titles, consistently low. Now, this is their page, right? This is just what it was, and for 1995, this is a pretty nice page. Right? It's nothing like it is now where there's all, you know, catalog menus and search options. Google wasn't even at the time. So, you didn't have that search, powered Google, anything like that. But they had links. You had your basic link catalog here. You had some of their recommendations. Those recommendations were just ask around in the company, right? Hey, Dr. Could you give us a list of recommended titles for such and such category, right? That's easily replicated. It's not going to be a competitive advantage for it because anybody can do it. Now, okay, so again, process flow, right? Customers visit the site, place some orders, Amazon assembles it, boom, all that's Porter who did the 5 forces model we talked about, and I said that it was a little weird because Porter also was a core guy talking about value chain, and his thing was between primary and secondary. So it's easy to understand in the context of manufacturing. So primary activities have two attributes. They relate directly to delivering the product. You don't have a product with getting the procurement, getting the parts to make the product. For example, you order a shipment from Amazon, shipping is $3.95. Amazon can look, it costs us to pretty easy. Their primary potential to deliver the product. Secondary activities, on the other hand, those are ones that indirect. Do. Same thing with like customer support, right? Obviously, you need some customer service for when things go wrong, people need help, whatever. If you have a whole giant pool of customer service people that are waiting and waiting for systems work better because hopefully you have better people in place. Customer support makes your retailing, direct customer selling work better, right? Because there's conflict resolutions, that sort of thing there. Customers are more confident. Makes it. Now, because I was a marketing guy, the weird thing is if you go up and you look this stuff up online, too much, how much is enough. But whatever, it's his thing. What I'm saying, understand the difference between primary and secondary activity. If anybody does go and look this stuff up, you'll probably see that marketing is listed as a primary activity. In this recommender system, what changes? Suddenly, boom, I'm going to do him bright red, in danger. Recommend stuff. System there, you must change blank to let customers access the recommender system. You must change your, yeah, you got to put links on the website for it, right? So your purchase date, suppose you don't that, right? You got some guy who looks at it. This is interesting. People who bought this also bought that. But now with the record, is it just one guy looking for a pattern? Boom, right? So not only does it to be big and fast, it has to be bigger and faster. So some key things you need. Very much. As always, I hope you enjoy taking the exam as much as I enjoy reading it. Okay. What's going to change with Amazon the publishers? Yes, and they're yeah, I mean that's kind of circular. What possible benefit could arise from placing larger orders with publishers? Better deals is one. There's one more. So let me put it. So, and it's enough to fill half. What are Amazon options at that point? It can wait till the next day to fill up. It could pay, right? It could pay the full truck rate for a truck that's only half full. Because that truck's right. That's going to way faster. Going to give them a big advantage over all the other smaller that are going to have, they say, well, we can get you your book in 3 to 5 business days. Amazon's like, fuck that, we'll get it to you tomorrow. That's a huge advantage. Chicago. Blue vehicles, mostly vans with white writing on the. We see Amazon trucks. You can't go around the corner and say, you know what, we have enough business on this one route. We can, instead of like paying for separate shipments everywhere with UPS, or they can say, we're going to load up this, we're going to stage all the books in so that, one at a time, the driver goes down the street, every other house, boom, they get out. Boom, like across the board, everything they need, they're going to need more of. All right. So I hope it made sense. Okay, but when we talk changing the value chain, that's all the stuff that we're talking about, right? Some steps are for Amazon, but if they can keep guys busy all day on the route, reasonably compact. Now, next thing for a business intelligence worker, basically just think of it as being a number cruncher, right? And it analyzes all kinds of data, both internal and external. And fundamentally, Amazon is a kind of business. Now, most business intelligence, the business, and they use that information to make better decisions. Traditional data, you'd visiting from such and such demand is for their product, and they're thinking of opening new stores in zip codes. You know what you think about that, right? And typically, they're gonna number send reports to the managers back saying, oh, here's where we're seeing a lot of demand for our product. Here's what our data mining says we should be advertising to this particular customer. You're walking through the aisle, something, where does the supermarket want to put the most and least profitable items? Where do they want to put the most profitable items? In the front. More generally, where they're highly visible. Profitable. Sometimes it's that they want to keep people coming back. But yeah, the stuff they really want to sell, the stuff that, not so much. You've ever been Jewel? That's the grocery store by us. Dominic's used to be the same way. And I guess to an extent, Whole. If it's a place where you're fairly open, you can bet that that's a pretty high profit zone. Right? Like for Whole Foods, where they're charging like $12 a pound. They're making. You want to have people be very quickly find what they're looking for, get done, right? And that's for online stores. That's what physical stores, they've used business intelligence basically in a way to shared it with customers to build loyalty, keep them coming back, allow Amazon to build scale and take over the universe. Recommend. They have because you have most customers who look at an item don't buy it. You get a lot more data if you're willing to. People who look. The output, of course, for a recommender system Yeah, I figured that my connection is poor. There we go. Okay. All right, here I am. I'm back. I don't know what happened there, but internet definitely bad. Okay, but suppose I'm on Amazon. I'm looking at the exploding kittens. Kaboom. Please do not do this to me. What the fuck? Blackboard's really been a bunch of related stuff. It's not clearly labeled, maybe because my internet is bad. Wow, they have a lot of stuff linked up here. What's that? Yeah, I don't know. Here I am. Okay. Anyway, so you can see that there's, long list of items, right? If you look at it, like all sorts of things that are in some sense similar that Amazon wants to see. Now, and see some more. But there's always design questions, right? So number one, historical window. How far back in time? If you just look at last month's data, last year, last few years, Amazon can try all of those and see what, and then kind of go with that. That's very sometimes the data can get outdated faster, or item variety. Sometimes Amazon wants to include different items, maybe not the exact top rank, just like we talked probably a second copy. So Amazon might, you know what, based on your purchase history, yeah, we would normally recommend, this book, but we can look at your purchase history. What's called business reengineering. So, or BPR. And BPR is just changing existing process, redesigning a process. It's very commonly done as a response to new technology. You heard you want anybody ever see it on rerun? Mad Men was like from advertising from like the 50s. That's what they did because sent out in those days. You had somebody type, and so you needed lots and lots. Well, guess what? After a little while, boom, suddenly you don't recipients from your database, hit send, goes to everybody. Suddenly you don't need nearly as many secretaries. So yeah, that was an example of BPR, right? You used to need a lot of one resource, then suddenly not so much. And of course, again, the big thing lately for this was switching from paper-driven processes. Now, with Amazon, well, let's talk. Most of the time, BPR is incremental, right? It's a small change. And the way that would work, number one, map the process, right? You draw some kind of diagram of how the process, you figure out what the release 80% of them, and is going to cost a lot less. You would have identified that as a performance problem. But in general, you look at, here's where, are there things we could replace our secondaries. There's still the kind of question of, well, what photo? Test. At some point, you have an idea. It's your best guess about what you're going to do. So you, and maybe it doesn't work so well. Maybe it's that kind of endless. When BPR is incremental, it's most of your process, but you like tweak some parts to make it. But with Amazon, their recommender system was really, when they introduced this recommender system, their user interface changed, right? The whole, instead of just linking you to the big landing page with all sorts of custom information based on what you, data requirements are much huge, has to be much more, has to be grabbed a lot, right? So that all goes into data management. And of course, impact on other systems. We talked about all that, right? If Amazon is growing because of the recommender, that entails a whole lot of consequences for things like contacting publishers, stuff like where, all that. Even HR, right? Amazon was growing so that they needed a lot more HR people to manage the hiring that they would do. That's kind of meta right there. All right. So a couple old articles about how the system was developed. If you want to look at that, that might be interesting. But we're going to talk a couple more minutes. We're going to go through data silos, and then we're going to cut it off at data mining here. Easier to build a separate database than to integrate it into an existing system, right? If you have a big system and you're integrating something into it, you have to make sure that everything is connected properly, right? It's fairly easy to design a separate system. You say, well, here's the data we want to have, here's the fields, here's how we structure. We're going to have this thing be a, right? You don't have to work. You can have one system gets updated, and you might have just a plain old one that's not in the, and that means you, right? When you have separate systems, of course, it's also very, or table, different, you can do referential, you can check that value that exists as a foreign key from, we can check and make sure that that foreign key value actually exists. You don't get some kind of error. And if there are multiple replicas, you can cross-check, match, item 3, match. But if the two are all stored on entirely separate systems, then once again, you get this basic problem that the data is the interactions happen at network speed instead of at RAM speed. But it's going to be a lot more work, take a lot more. Okay. And finally, if you have any system, that require multiple databases, that's going to increase your latency there. It's going to make everything happen. If you access one data, all that data is stored in RAM, you get the response super fast. But if you have to do a that spans the two databases, that's going to be super slow. Yeah, that's some problem. Now, the technical term for this, data silo. Data silos are just when different functional areas or other have separate database systems, right? They're isolated. You guys know what a silo is in real life? In farming? What's a silo? Nobody knows? Yeah, what's a silo? I mean, but what? Yeah, it's like a big round tower. Yeah, it's a very large bucket if you want to look at it. And you can put grain in it or manure or whatever. I'm not going to be too fussy about what you put. But the idea with a silo is that you put one kind of thing in it at a time, right? So given the example of manure, you would not want to mix manure and grain, right? In most cases, you would not. The idea of a silo is just that it's a structure that's separate from your other silos. So data silos are very typical of old-timey paper-driven systems, right? If you could still find a big one anywhere, that's what it would be. Also, business units that operate separately, but they're under the same ownership umbrella. So, for example, if you just had one business that acquired another, there's going to be a while before they merge all their databases together, right? For the first, month or few months, maybe even a couple years, that acquired is going to operate fairly independently. It's going to keep its own data. If the business is not entirely sure if it's going to keep the acquisition, right, it's going to buy it now, and maybe it might not even ever bother to integrate its data. Also, global operations, same kind of thing. A lot of these big multinational companies, they operate fairly independent units in different countries. Data silos are a real, and it's just the different functional areas or components of a manage separate databases that don't interact with each other. They're not structured under common structure. So when you have data silos, one of the problems that can happen is that the answers are there, but for doing any kind of enterprise-wide analytics, it's a lot of work to actually get those answers. So for example, suppose you have, well, let's go on the page here. This oil drilling operation, I believe this was back when I looked up this, I didn't write down what company. I believe it was Shell. So you had this but it had a lot of local, other small, or something in Venezuela. It would be, I believe Venezuela was Spanish. Portuguese, but I believe they speak Spanish, right? Or if it's off the coast of India, whatever the local language, that's what the database is going to be coded in. And they can have different terms for different minerals, different abbreviations for them. They can do assay results in because they're entirely separate databases. They might even have totally different fields, right? They might have set up their databases very differently. So what does that mean? Well, if you want to answer a local problem, like you're just looking in the Norwegian database to say, hey, where can our Norwegian people, where can they drill for oil and get the best results? You can answer that just within their database, right? Because it's all an apples to apples comparison there. But if you want to do some global thing, you have to figure out what query you're going to write. you have to custom write that query for every one of your different databases in a language that's understood by that, and make sure that all the fields you're looking at are there and calibrated correctly, right? It's a big pain. So that simple system isn't going to work for a global problem. Finding the 10 best drilling sites worldwide, you'd have to custom write for each database, make sure it's correct, and then do some kind of conversion on the result to make sure that, you know, at the end of the day, you get a single metric for comparison. Integrating data silos, you might say, well, why don't you just start everything off with integrating right from the back? Remember, roll back to this, speed to market, right? That's number one. It's very often easier to build a new separate problem, right? So it's kind of like if you're really, 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 really hungry and the only food around is McDonald's, you're going to say, well, you know, you might have some people wearing multiple hats. So you might have like one guy who does all of your money stuff. He does all your finance, all your accounting, supervises all the advertising. You know, he does your online ads. He might have all that. And so even though in theory these three databases are separate for those, they're all managed by the same guy. So, you know, he knows what's going on. And when you're small, the volume of data is pretty small anyway. So it's not like you have these massive queries on massive databases that are going to take a really long time to execute, you know? So again, data silos, if you're small, they're really mostly only a theoretical problem. But if you're very big, like Amazon, it's something you definitely want to avoid. Now, when integration eventually becomes necessary, they'll integrate all of their data in common, right? So there's one with identity, you know, any capacity. So all those things, every database in all of your world are going to use, and that way, enterprise resource planning. It was a big thing in the 90s. By the end of the aughts, by the end of the first decade of this century, it was pretty much done for most of the large businesses, and even a lot of small and medium businesses had done it too. But in the 90s, there was a window where ERP installations were businesses were spending hundreds of millions of dollars to do it, and sometimes it would work great, sometimes it would fail. The businesses that did a good job with it tended to survive. The businesses that didn't tended to crash and burn. So anyway, we'll talk more about ERP later in the course. That's pretty much it. Okay? All right, so we got a few minutes. I'm going to end it here. The other stuff we got is data mining. Then we'll make a little bit of a dent in the cloud systems, cloud services lecture. But it's a shorter lecture, so that's okay. We'll get any questions on any of this stuff? Nothing? Something? All right, that's all I got then. Have a good weekend. We'll see you next time. All right, apologies for poor connection. All right, we'll see you next time.